One thing to remain vigilant about when you're implementing a view is to make sure that the code you're producing is both readable and maintainable. It's a challenge inside of a view because it interweaves declarative code and imperative code, and any environment that allows you to do that has a tendency to become messy. The code sample that I have on the screen is from a default MVC project. It displays a username if the user is currently logged in, and it displays a logon link if the user is currently anonymous. But if I'm a web designer who is coming in here to change the appearance of this, it's difficult for me sometimes to locate the HTML beginning tags and the HTML end tags and the other elements that I want to modify to change the appearance because it's interwoven with all the C# stuff. Likewise, if I'm the C# developer that wants to come in here and change the behavior of this page, it's sometimes difficult for me to pick up matching curly braces, for instance. There's also these other characters that are special in the C# language, but here they're not being used as part of the imperative code. They're there so that they can be displayed inside of the UI. Programmers have a term for code that is hard to read. We call it spaghetti code because pieces are interwoven so much that it's hard to pick them apart and make sense of it. In HTML environments, some people call this tag soup. The code that we have here is borderline spaghetti. It's a small plate of spaghetti. Now, the good news is that this is from the default MVC project, but is inside of its own user control, so it is a partial view. If this code were actually part of a larger view, so that we'd have HTML and C# code above it and below it, it would be very difficult to pick out this particular piece of code as the login status for a user. But since it is in a partial view, we've extracted that out and made it very explicit in the view itself that says render a partial. And the name of that partial is logon user control. Partial views in general are a great way to reduce the complexity in your views because you can extract these specific pieces that have a dedicated behavior and put them into a component where someone can actually focus on them. And when they're looking at these things inside of a view, then there's a name associated with this partial view that'll lead that person to understand the purpose of that partial view. So partial views can reduce complexity. It's also a great way to reuse chunks of HTML and logic across multiple views. Another tool to consider, particularly when branching is involved, is to use an HTML helper. And we've built a couple HTML helpers in this course. They're very easy to do. One thing that would make me very nervous about this piece of view code is that we have some logic here that's checking is the request authenticated. And if someone comes in here and they mismatch the curly braces that they're just trying to line up with their eyes, it would be very simple to add something inside of the place here that is unauthenticated and show something to an anonymous user that was really intended to be shown to someone who is authenticated to the system. I tend to favor using an HTML helper whenever branching logic is involved because an HTML helper is very easy to test.